Yeah, it's amazing. Murich, goal of the month. All right, we're live. So welcome to episode 252 of Together BHA. We've
One
got
for the ages.
myself. Yeah, it sure is. It sure is. Got myself and Craig here. Robin will be joining shortly. Craig, how have you been? How's the last week also been since we last spoke?
Good, yeah. Busy, like without football, it's been all right, like a normal week. If you factor in the album results, less so. But yeah, what about you? You've had some serious moving to do, right?
Yeah, had a lot going on. Moved house, got settled, everything's in, we're sorted. We're watching us lose the football games at the new house as well. So yeah, it's been pretty good. But yeah, it's good. Just getting everything sorted when you move house, it's just a lot of work, like just a lot of shit. But we're here, we're sorted out now, and it's nice to just be back on. It feels like that was like the last step of like getting settled back in, was
right.
Getting our own house
Since you moved home, or
yeah, exactly. Like getting our own house, like getting like our own step on the property ladder, and that just felt like it was the last step. So it was nice to do it. Yeah, I mean,
mate.
super lucky, isn't it? Really, like just everything fell into place in the US, and it's just luck.
Right.
People say it's hard work, but it's not.
It's like most of the time, I'd say like 80% of the time, it's just right place at the right time. Like some of it you just can't plan. So like,
yeah,
just ride it.
Facts. Like so many people are like, oh, I own my own home, hard work, hard graft. Like no, like I had like 3 job offers like when I moved to the US, and I picked 1 out of 3, like almost like on a whim, and like it was just pure luck that one was the right choice, right place, right time. Like don't buy into the hard work pays off, fellas. Like, it's all just jammy. And clearly hard work on the football pitch doesn't pay off because our team is working very hard, keeping control of the ball, trying to create chances and doing absolutely nothing. So life imitates art. I don't even know where to start here. We have a whopping 7 goals to talk about, but none for us. And in fact, that really just covers the entire April period. I think we just talked before we went on that Muric has just won our goal of the month. So congratulations to the Burnley goalkeeper for his award in April.
Yeah, that'll be in the post, but we'll probably miss. So yeah,
yeah, you're not wrong. Bournemouth have been in tremendous form, especially at home. Iraola has clearly got them playing excellent football. They're a team this season moving in a really good direction, right? They're playing really well. Their home form is tremendous. Is it fair to feel like even with a fully fit side, that 1 point from our last 2 games would have been quite a good achievement? Or do you think that we should have been looking at getting a win today and an inevitable free hit against Manchester City?
I don't know. I think if you take it in isolation, right, and you go, right, it's our team against theirs. There's no prior games. There's no prior form, right? You'd go in and go, right, I think each team are looking for 3 points, right? But we're on this inevitable downward slope where nothing is going right. Whilst for Bournemouth, it's one of those resurgent seasons, like you said. It's like Areola's got them playing really good football. They've got a really good team. Solanke's on fire. So, it was one of those where you're like, okay, this is going to be tough, but I think we can get something out of it. And I think we spoke on the last pod was just like, this is one of the only games where we can probably borderline expect points, right? So, we talked about the running and how difficult it is and everything like that, but it's just like, okay, this is one of the only games where we could probably get 3 points from. So for it to go down like it did today, isn't great. But like you said, I would have gone in and go, I'll take a point, right? Given our current form and given our current injury status, everything in between, given that we've got nothing to play for either, you go, right, we'll take a point and we'll move on. But not even close.
Yeah, 4 more games to go. 3 of them at home. Small mercies, right? 3 of them are at home. Brighton against Villa, Newcastle against Brighton, Brighton against Chelsea, Brighton against Manchester United. Do you think we take a single point from the rest of the season? Do you think we score a goal the rest of this season? Like, what do you think is
Oh,
the prognosis.
I just tweeted out that I don't know where it's going to come from, right? Like we'll talk about a couple of the chances that we've had. Like they come, very few and far between, right? But there's still chances. But I don't know. Honestly, you're up against 4 teams in the top half. Let's not kid ourselves, right? And we're not anymore, right? We're on this sort of free fall. So I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't get a point. I think the most realistic expectation is that we draw one of those games. But we'll see. What about you? What do you think?
I think we do score a few more, actually, just because United and Chelsea have like hilariously bad defenses. Like, even if we end up losing like 5-1, like I still think we score a goal because they are so bad. At least Bournemouth and City are both very defensively solid currently. Like I think if you look at it, like since January, like Bournemouth are like very, very good goal difference wise. Like they started off poorly, but they've turned it around a lot. And City, I think have conceded 32 goals all season. Only Arsenal have conceded less. So
yeah, it's less than a goal a game. So as expected,
unsurprising. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to know where to start because everything is bad. We conceded early both times. Kevin De Bruyne and this time it was Marcos Senesi. Set pieces, counter attacks, open play. There's really not a single thing we can defend well currently, and there's not a single moment really where you think we look dangerous. We don't look dangerous on the counter. We don't look dangerous on transition. We don't look dangerous in build up. We don't look dangerous on set pieces. Like, I'm really unsure as to where to start here. But I guess let's start with the City game and the lineup that we threw out there. And namely Valentin Barco. 2 90-minute games, football games for him at left back or left wing back, depending on where you want to sit on that. What did you make of Valentin Barco's essential first debut home and away for the club at Bournemouth and at City?
Barring the results, right? You have to try and take that out of your damn head.
Take that out, yeah.
It's like, okay, individual basis, he's clearly raw and he's clearly got a lot of potential. Made a couple of mistakes. The City mistake, it is what it is. But again, we always say this, and I think I always say this. I sound like a broken record, but you have to let those mistakes happen in order to learn. Like, these guys are 19 years old, 20 years old, and they are going to make mistakes. If they're 20 years old and not making mistakes, they're Jude Bellingham, right? So like they wouldn't be 13th in the Premier League and playing for Brighton. So it's one of those things. I like him. I do. I think it's forced with the Estepinian injury and him being out for a long time, it seems. So it's like, well, who else do we play at left back, right? We have to give this guy some minutes. We have to let him play his natural game for him to learn. You've got nothing to play for, like we said. So I like him. I'm excited by him. Their mistakes are bound to happen. It's just part of the parcel. But I think he's good. He's going to be really good. What about you? I mean, it obviously defensively he's got a bit to work on. Still doesn't know our game yet, but attacking wise, he's another threat.
I think that is the main thing. We were told by Boca fans, like anyone who went online to talk about Valentin Barco was told by Boca fans that he's not a left back. Like over and over again, like we promise you, he's not a left back. And I think we've seen in 2 games, he's not a left back. For me, he's not a left back. He could be a left winger. They are insistent that he was best in the central and midfield. Which we've seen a fair few left backs be able to transition into centre midfield, which is such an odd thing. But if that's the case, like it may be something for him to do there. But like my main takeaway from these 2 games is that they were right. I've seen enough in 180 minutes to know that Valentin Barco is not a Premier League level left back and probably never will be, simply on his size and his general play. Like watching him, like this kid isn't a left back. Like they were right for me. So I think really like the only thing I've got to take away from it is that I want to see him play further forward. Like for me, like that means like stop with the João Pedro out left because you need to play someone somewhere. Like let's play Barco up there and have João Pedro go back central where he's actually dangerous and can do something. Because right now, Pedro is ineffective out there. And we saw a couple of very, very good footballers have arguments with their managers this weekend. Klopp and Salah got into it yesterday. Looked like Pedro and De Zerbi had a bit of a face-off when he was subbed off today. What do you think? Do you worry about the mentality of this team going into next season? Because I do. Like, we are liable to be on a 10-game non-winning, 10 games without a win streak. Our last one was obviously the game against Forest. And Premier League, we obviously won against Roma a couple of days later and haven't won since. And I don't think we will again this season with the last 4 that we have. As you say, like, if we nick a point here or there, I wouldn't be shocked. End of season results are always a little bit odd as well, aren't they? Like, you have your random, like, I think one of the lower league games finished 4-4 yesterday. Like, you have a few of those just coming out of nowhere. But for me, like, it doesn't matter how good you are. Like, the mentality is tough to get out of when you're losing games constantly. If you've got a bad atmosphere in the dressing room, you're arguing with each other, you frankly don't know what you're doing on the pitch as a team of 11 football players, which I feel like we've seen both times this week. Like, it looks like they don't frankly know what they're doing, which ultimately rests on the coach, right? Like, do you worry about the mentality going into next season? Whether on, I suppose that the caveat there is if De Zerbi stays, because if he doesn't, the mentality doesn't matter, right? Like, new manager doesn't, totally irrelevant at that point, right? It's a total overhaul. Do you worry about that mentality going into next season with De Zerbi, the coaching staff, and the squad we have now on a 10-game non-winning streak going into week 1 next year?
I think I'm conscious of it. I wouldn't say that I'm actively worried about it. And the reason I think that way is because I think the season has already ended for some of these players, right? Like, so for some of these guys, these last few games don't count, right? So, like, you're playing Ofire and O'Mahony like today, right? In a game where this is the most likely place you're going to get 3 points for the rest of the season. And we heavily rotated for the Bournemouth game. I'm not saying anything against those two guys. It's an example of the rotation and the level that we had on the bench today versus who was playing in that starting 11. For me, in my own opinion, indicates where we are in this season and how much we probably care about the rest of these results. So for me, I'm conscious of it, not actively worried. It's going to be something that lingers over them, but that's up to the coach and the coaching team to make sure that that's alleviated. I'm more worried about the style of these losses and just how badly we're losing, or just even that confidence or just severe lack of conviction within this team at the moment. Like, you can lose 1-0 and it's like a last minute winner for Bournemouth, right? It's a whole different conversation. If you go to Chelsea and you lose 1-0, or if you lose 4-0, that's very different, right? It's the category of these losses that worry me more than it is really next season. If you continue to lose 3 and 4-0 for the rest of the season, I'd be a lot more worried than if we actually, I wouldn't say put up a fight, but if we were more productive. So it's a struggle, but I appreciate where the worry and the concern is coming from, because when it rains, it pours, right? And it's very hard to turn that ship around.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen better teams than us, like, have shocking seasons in the Premier League where their squad has no business having a bad season. I think that's my worry. Like, it really is. And I think, unfortunately, it gives me the vibe that the rest of the season we are going to ship a lot of goals. I think we're going to lose by 2 or more pretty much every game. Like, it doesn't look like we're going to score, and we don't look like defending. Jan-Paul Van Heck, latest on the injury lineup. 4 games to go and less than a month left. Like, it could be a season ender for him, because it was a muscle-based injury. Obviously, the congestion, the fixture congestion, is a problem. The World Cup from a year and a half ago has been a problem for almost every team since it happened, right? Like, we've seen it echo through. We've had some bad luck, right? Solly March, like, there was nothing anyone could do about some of these injuries. Like him, Ferguson, Mitoma. Like we're seeing a bunch of these injuries come through that are impact issue injuries that you can't account for them.
Mm-mm.
Was having a lot of them, bad luck. But do you think there is? Do you think some of the blame also lies on the coaching and the training style? Like, do we start having to ask questions, or do we hope that there are questions being asked of this coaching staff in the way that we are running our training sessions at this point?
Right? Yeah. I have no idea what goes on behind closed doors. I have no idea how hard or how soft they're running these guys. I think a lot of it is just lack of luck or just a horrible coincidence that these all happen at the same time. I think players go through these injuries. We've just had them stockpile simultaneously. And if you combine that with a very dedicated way in how we play, and we'll come on to that with the City and the Bournemouth results as well, is that some players are just more important than others, right? So your wing backs, your wide midfielders are so important to this De Zerbi system that if you lost both Matoma and March and you've got Estepinian, who's been struggling all season, God knows why we started playing him again if he wasn't right, and a right back that really we should be dipping into the market for in the summer. If all four of those positions that are so vital to the way that you play are being heavily rotated and using, I wouldn't say non-optimal, but players that wouldn't typically be there if you had your starters, then you are going to struggle, right? So I don't know how much it is down to the coaching and the medical side of things. I'm just going to put it down to just sheer unfortunate luck in having so many injuries at one time. But also, it's not an excuse because every other team has injuries too, right? It's just you have to sort of see, okay, if everyone's got injuries, why is it impacting us more? And that's because Mitoma and March are so vital to the way that we play, and it's tough to replace them.
Yeah, Robin, welcome. We've just been discussing a lot of mess, really, with what we've seen over the last 7 days of football. I guess the first question I've got for you, Robin, to talk about is the goalkeeper situation. We saw Steele back in for City, Verbruggen back in for Burnley, for Bournemouth. Do you think we are back to rotation hell, or do you think that was De Zerbi trying to be smart, cute with his like decision making, with how clever Steele is usually on the ball? Because he is, right? Like he's the best goalkeeper on the ball in the Premier League outside of Alisson and Edison, right? In basically every metric. Unfortunately, it's the rest of it that's not very good, which is quite important to being a goalkeeper. Do you think that was just a one-off? Do you think we'll keep seeing Bart play, or do you think that we might be back to a bit more of a rotation for the next four?
I think we'll be back to a bit more of a rotation. I think what we know about De Zerbi when he's talked about goalkeepers is how it depends on who the opposition is. So I think you're exactly right. We were kind of lulled into it because Bart had a run of what, 5 or 6 games,
6 in a row,
trot. So you naturally think, all right, he's come to a decision. But it may just have been that those 5 or 6 games, De Zerbi decided that the style suited Bart better than Steele. What will be interesting in the summer is if he's run this as like a season-long experiment to basically decide, who's the better of the two. If you have to pick one, who is it? We'll have to see. I can't imagine them continuing it into next season just because of how it seems to go down. But if De Zerbi still is the manager next season, what we can infer about him is that he doesn't seem to take much notice of any of these outside noises, right, or criticisms or comments. If he thinks it's the best route for how he wants to play, then we may well see it again next season. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Be interesting to see what happens. But yeah, I wouldn't rule out more rotation.
Yeah, I hope not. I just give Bart his run of games and get it over and done with. yeah, it's exhausting at this point. 3-0 down in 34 minutes. Game was over against Manchester City. Effectively, it was over at 1, really, wasn't it? Let's all be honest. Like, for most Manchester City games, if they go 1-0 up, the game is over against most teams, right? Unless you're Real Madrid or like other big footballing sides. What did you make of Oluluga Ofia getting a lot of game time? Went on loan to, I believe it was Hearts last season. Had his loan cut short, I believe, with a heart issue. Big lad, doesn't seem to have bothered him too much because he was getting about it for the last 2 football games. Played 45 minutes against Manchester City, and then played another 75 minutes today. Both of you, I'd love to hear your opinions on Ofia. He primarily was a centre half, is my understanding. That's his best position. He played right winger and right wing back in the last 2 football games for a long amount of time. So what did you make of Ofia? How do you Potter liked him too, right? He started getting games under Graham Potter. He's now getting games under Roberto De Zerbi. He's obviously doing something right. What do you both make of him, Craig?
I still think he's suited to a centre back, but I do think he's I think he's good. He is. I think he shows glimpses of what he's capable of. He's clearly comfortable on the ball. I think I didn't see too much of the City game, to be honest. I was in the office and I was trying to watch it whilst people were peering over my shoulders. But based on what the Bournemouth game was like today, I thought he was a good outlet. I thought, being able to run up on that right side was good. I think he just ran out of gas, to be honest. I don't. His stamina is probably not well suited to that role of going up and down, up and down. So that's where my centre back jibe comes from. It's a silly one, but he's good, right? Is obviously you've had multiple managers now put their trust in him to play and be in these positions. Ed's also, further highlights our own troubles in that wide area that I spoke about just before, and having to play a fire there when I don't think we should. But he's good. It's a good outlet. He created a couple of things today, which is more than some of the players did today. So yeah, I thought he was good.
Robin, do you think he'll have more of a part to play next season, or do you think he may end up going on another loan?
Well, if he can go out on loan to the Championship and play centre half for the season, I wouldn't be averse to that, because I'm kind of with Craig. I see that as where his future is going to be, especially in the kind of Van Hecke mold of having someone who's comfortable bringing the ball out. He looked really comfortable doing that. And he wasn't afraid, he wasn't afraid to take on players and actually keep going. I'm with Craig as well. He just ran out of gas. But I think stats-wise and physique-wise, you look at him and you go, yeah, I could see him partnering Van Hecke. Maybe potentially not as first choice, but he's someone that now we've seen him in a couple of games. You're going to see his name on the team sheet, and you're not going to be immediately having alarm bells ringing in the background, right? You're going to be thinking, okay, he's physical, he's strong, he's quick, he's good on the ball. Haven't seen much of how good he is in the air, but given how badly we defend any aerial crosses into the box anyway, I'm not going to mark him down, especially on that. But yeah, I think he's one of those players that may actually flourish from this last little period of games that we've got. Certainly, it's a kind of prolonged audition, isn't it, to say, basically, even if it's De Zerbi or if it's whoever else, to basically go, is he comfortable enough that we think, okay, he is a viable third or fourth choice centre back in the Premier League, or does he need a season in the Championship? So it'll be interesting to see how much football he gets.
It feels like a lot of these players that are coming in are basically playing like early preseason football, doesn't it? Like it does feel a little bit like we are playing a bunch of auditions before we decide what we're going to do with these players. And Potter did this too, right? Like it's not like we can, blame De Zerbi for this with the form that we're in. Like Potter did this quite a bit as well. We saw the ascension of Alexis and Caicedo year 1 and year 2 when they got brought in late to do exactly this. Ofia may well be one of those that joins the gang really with that kind of form. Stephen in the chat says that he thinks that De Zerbi struggles to have the attitude to win games when we play poorly. And I think it's a really interesting topic of conversation. And it's where I feel that this is all stemming from personally as well. Like this whole essential collapse in ideology, structure, conversion of chances, defending of chances, everything. Like it feels like it all comes down to this. De Zerbi has said that he believes that we are more like we represent his soul better than any football team he's managed, right? Like I think Sassuolo was his heart, like Shakhtar was his brain, and like you know how he is. Like, and De Zerbi says he thinks that Brighton and the mentality of Brighton and the way we play represent his soul better than anything else. Well, his soul doesn't feel particularly happy right now, does it? Post Roma and Wolves, essentially. He's non-committal to the club. He's been calling out the ownership, essentially, for signings since last summer. And it's quite obvious that his heart is not fully in this situation right now, whether it's to do with wanting to go somewhere else or whether it is just sheer frustration and knowing we have nothing left to play for. And for a guy that eats, sleeps, and breathes football to a almost obsessive degree, to the point of having, a dissertation written on Solly March before he took over the managerial role. But we know what he pours into this. He's said before when he hung up at Sassuolo that he asks more of his players than most managers ever do. Like I worry that it's reflecting on the football pitch, don't you? Like, do you two feel the same way? It looks like a direct reflection of where De Zerbi's soul is right now, is being played out on that football pitch, because it looks utterly bereft of just about everything.
I mean, I think you've got a lot of players out there. The ones who've not been injured, right, are knackered. Like Pascal Gross is knackered because he's basically had to play virtually every game this season, and you can tell, right? Because he's in his kind of early 30s, mid 30s. He's just knackered. So I think there's an element of other players that have had to play a lot of football are just knackered. It's pretty undeniable, right? Our season ended in that Wolves Roma week, and you can make all the arguments you want about, players should be professional, keep playing to the last game. There's still a chance we could have got top 7, top 8. But realistically, it looks like they also believed that the season finished with that Wolves Roma week. Whether that's right or wrong, that's how it looks like to me. So whether it's a direct reflection of how De Zerbi's feeling, I don't know. I just think we ran out of steam at that point of the season, not helped by the fact we didn't have João Pedro and Matoma for those games. We've kind of done this to death. I just think we ran out of steam, basically. We didn't have, as much as we've got quite a big squad, we don't have a depth of experience that could deal with those injuries at a crucial time of the season. To Craig's point, as I joined at the beginning, I'm more erring on the side of it's just really unlucky that we had a ton more injuries at the time where, we could have done really without them. And I just think it's disappointing for the players, right? Because, you go for this position where, okay, you've got a pivotal week where, fine margins, and actually, you cruise through both of those games and suddenly you've still got 2 viable trophies that you might win. So to have the win knocked out of you within whatever it was, 8 days, for a pretty young squad, I think would have been pretty demoralising. So I don't think it necessarily reflects on De Zerbi. I think it's just a disappointing set of circumstances.
Yeah, it is. I think I'll pick up on your point as well, Josh, just around the whole soul thing and how troubling this stuff is, right? Like, also, if there are rumblings of De Zerbi not being happy, not being content, I'm pretty sure everyone in the training ground would have at least heard it, because he is loud, very loud, right? So if there are those sort of discussions or conversations, there's been things in the media, left, right, and rhubarb, right, around, potentially De Zerbi going somewhere in the summer. You'd be silly to think that doesn't have an effect on the players if it has any ounce of truth. right? Like I said, your season ends in Wolves Roma week, right? You've got nothing to play for. You can't go down. There's nothing really to look upwards for. You just see out the season the best way that you can. But also, by the way, there's some rumblings that the manager might leave. So all of you that are currently playing right now might not be playing for this manager in 2 months' time. Or, there's nothing else really going on, or the manager's heart's not in it, or we don't think his manager's heart is in it. So why are we playing? What are we doing? I just think it's confidence. I think some of it is just general, just maybe uncomfortability on what next season looks like as well for some of these players. So there's a myriad of different things that are happening here, right? You can speculate as much as you want, but the fact remains is that, and to Stephen's point in the chat, is that there isn't a plan B. There isn't an ugly way of winning for this team. You go 1-0 down, and we've kind of got the script in front of us. So one of my very small gripes, I know I'm probably going to get crap for this, right? But whenever we go 1-0 down, there's never a way back, or there doesn't feel like there's a way back. And the way that we do play and creating those transitions and forcing the opponent to press on us, even that's not working. We just saw that today. We got pressed into oblivion and it didn't work, right? So when your confidence is out, or when you're really tired, you've got all of these injuries as well, even that plan A doesn't work. And that's why we've got 2 points in 7 or 8 games.
I mean, kind of getting what we're promised, right? Sorry, Josh. Like, this is how he is, right? You look back through his other jobs, he doesn't compromise the style. It's quite, when you boil it down, it's pretty simple. What you see is what you get. And when it works, we've seen how brilliant it can be. And when it doesn't work, it's the other extreme, right? And the big question is, if you're playing a very distinct style, like we've heard from everybody, Lewis Dunk when De Zerbi first joined, about how long it took the players to get used to it and how intense it was and how much learning there is to get used to the roles. How easy is it to flip to another style, right? Because I don't know any, like if you took Manchester City, right, it's a bizarre example, right? If you said to if Manchester City were in a rut, right, they went through 1 win in 10, a team that plays a very distinct style, is Pep Guardiola going to pivot to like a long ball plan B? Like, my point is that these teams that have really distinct styles, how many of them really have a viable plan B to fall back on?
We've seen it this season. Klopp does not have one and refuses to deviate, and his results are suffering due to that. Yeah. Like, we've watched it. Like, we've watched that exact situation unfold with Liverpool from like January, like since Salah went to Egypt, basically.
Yeah.
Like, we've watched this exact thing play out, even under Klopp's last hurrah that was supposed to be this like fucking rainbows and unicorns. Like, it's still like absolutely fallen apart for Liverpool. Like, it's been,
and that's what I mean. Like, it's kind of really easy to throw around well, let's just be adaptable and let's just play a different way. But when you've got a system that I imagine requires constant, like, you need constant reinforcement of De Zerbi's system. I reckon it's not like you just learn it in pre-season, right, and then you're done. I'd imagine you're constantly having to repeat those patterns of play every training session. So to actually develop a different style, I'm saying in an ideal world you would have a viable plan B, but I think for teams that have such a distinct and very intricate, very difficult to learn style, I don't think it's that realistic to have one that you can fall back onto, especially when you've got all of the other issues that we've got with injuries and et cetera, et cetera. So, I think it's kind of, you get what you sign up for with De Zerbi. And, the highs are very high, and they have been very high, and the lows are very low. But, ultimately, we're going to probably finish about where our wage budget is in terms of the league. So I'm still I think the summer will be very, very interesting from two points of view. And it was one thing I was going to raise, actually. So if you take it, basically, obviously we've got is De Zerbi going to be here? Is he not going to be here? I think, without going down too much of a rabbit hole on that, I think the likelihood he is, and it's probably what I mentioned a couple of weeks ago in our last episode, it may well be because there aren't actually any clubs that actually want him right now, rather than him really wanting to stay. Like, if you rattle through the list,
I'll flip the question on you, Robin, because it was a point you put out into our chat. Like, what do you say we lose our next 4? and all of them by 2 goals or more, and it's just disastrous. Like it's just a total season collapse, right? Do you think that Bloom gets rid of De Zerbi?
No.
Craig,
Not
do you think
not
there's
even
any
one,
chance of
not
that?
even 1% chance. I don't think.
I don't think so either. I
Neither
I'm
do
gonna,
I, by the way. But
Yeah,
you
yeah.
asked the question, Robin. So
I know.
I'll flip it on
like,
you.
yeah, but I think
I-
it's one of those ones.
I think it's
Ultimately, you
alright.
go, is there? You know, it's where you go. Is there? I don't know. I think it's highly unlikely. Like I said to you, I think if we're in the situation right where everybody's fit, you've got literally an entire squad to pick from, and you've got the form that we had this calendar year. That's a very different discussion. If that was the case, that percentage number would be a lot higher for me, and I think probably for everyone, right? If everybody's fit and from January to the end of the season we're effectively bottom 3 form, then it becomes a viable suggestion. Don't think it is right now. So that's obviously the first point is he going to be here? I think he is going to be here, because if we rattle through the jobs that, you know, we've talked about on various episodes, you know, Xavi staying at Barcelona, Slot's going to Liverpool.
That's funny, by the way. Xavi turning around and staying at Barcelona.
And just going, it's fine.
Like,
it's you know,
peak,
it looks
like Barcelona. It's peak La Liga. Like that. I'm sure that we don't honestly like talking about Brighton's depressing. Like on top of like the total Barcelona mess that is behind the scenes of Barcelona, like the whole goal line tech stuff. Like, have we seen this week? Like an absolute clear-cut ball went over the line, and it turns out La Liga doesn't have goal line technology because it's too expensive. In the same week, they've also confirmed that they will be playing regular season games in the US in the very near future.
It's mad, isn't it? It's a bizarre one. But yeah, so Xavi's staying at Barcelona, Slot's going to Liverpool, looks like Ralph Rangnick's going to Bayern Munich, Lopetegui's going to AC Milan. So that's all that's ticked off all of the jobs that at various that we know are going to be available, right?
Manchester United.
I say that's the one, but I don't think they'll go for it because
no, but I am 100% certain it will be available at this point. This last 7 days. Craig, do you think the same thing as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Did you see Ten Hag going, I think we're one of the most entertaining teams in the league? And it's like, yeah, you are, but not in the way that you think.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, Man United's going to be available.
He's banned media. He started banning certain media.
He's done that.
You know, that's the end of a manager's tenure when they start banning certain newspapers.
Yeah, and it's the local one of them's like the Manchester Evening News or something. When it's like literally the local paper, you're in trouble. So that job will be available, but that's kind of, you look at everything we know about Jim Ratcliffe and Dave Brailsford, right? It's the marginal gains thing, right? It's so structured. You want someone, you put in a structure and you want someone to basically come in, follow it to the letter, don't rock the boat. It's basically got Gareth Southgate or Graham Potter written all over it, right? Even if those two managers, obviously they're probably both going to be available. One's available now and probably the other one is going to be available. Even if they were both solidly in jobs, right? You look at that structure and you go, those are basically the two managers that you'd look at it and go, these are the ones who are going to basically come and not rock the boat and just stick to this thing. De Zerbi's just the absolute opposite of that. So I think there's just not, unless there's any left field jobs that come up, I think it's very likely that he'll be here. Whether that's because he really wants to be here or whether because he doesn't have the opportunity, doesn't matter. He's going to be here. So then you look at it and you say, okay, the summer's going to be very, very big, because this is going to be the tipping point where you go, are we going to we're going to have a pretty big clear out, right? And this is what I was going to come on to, because it's more interesting to talk about this than what we've seen on the football pitch, right? In the last week or the last month or 3 months or 4 months, largely. So you look at the squad now and you go, there's going to be some really obvious departures, right? So Fatty's going to go back to Barcelona. I know De Zerbi's talked about having him for another season. I just don't think that's really going to happen. When he doesn't start, today, it's just not going to happen. So Fatty's going back to Barcelona, which is a chunk of change in the wage, budget. Surely Lallana's hanging his boots up, because I mean that Man City game, he was a yard away from the ball, right? And there was no Manchester City player within about 5 yards, and he still was second to the ball. So Lallana's done, I think, right? I think everyone probably is there. Whether he stays with us as a coach, whether he goes to Liverpool, whether he goes to Southampton, he's going to go as a coach somewhere. We've got a year on Milner. We've got a year option on James Milner, right? At this point, I don't think anyone thinks we're going to take that up. Right?
Do you think he stays at the club though? Do you think he transitions to a coaching role?
Probably,
because it's really clear that Lallana will be, right. Like,
yeah,
it's absolutely clear he's going to be transitioning to that role very, very soon. But do you think that he stays also, or do you think that we might see him just bin it off?
I think he'll go. I think he will go into a coaching role somewhere. Like, I know he's so close to this Premier League record, right? I think he's like 20 games, 25 games short of it.
Yeah.
Do you know what's going to happen? Like, do you know what the likelihood is? Like, there's going to be this emotional Leeds United reunion, right? If Leeds go up.
I'm not sure they will. That, like, I tell you, like, none of those teams in the Championship seem to want to get promoted.
Want to go up.
I don't blame them. The league is great, but like, I'm not. Like,
I mean, get out of it.
Leicester have sealed promotion. This was supposed to be the end of the pod where we talked around the ground, so we're going to delay it. Actually, we're not even getting into it. So
Milner's going, right? So we've got
Milner's going to be gone.
Batty's going. Lallana's going.
Lallana and Welbeck is also at the end of his contract. So
he's about to sign.
Contracts that expire this June, just to get it out there while we're talking about this. So the contracts that expire in June 2024 are Steven Alzate, pretty sure to say that's a free transfer. Lallana, Milner, and Welbeck are 3 old guard, and then Pupillon, the Aussie lad. I wouldn't be surprised if we extended him just because
he's been in and around it, right?
Yeah. So that's a lot of wage bill, frankly, going off as well. Not only the fatty one, but like, that's all 3 of those, I presume, are rather well paid football players in the line.
I mean, you're probably looking at, without knowing the exact figures, you're probably looking at well north of 300 grand a week between them, which is, not an insignificant amount of money, right? So if you take that, if you think Welbeck's probably going to stay, more than likely to stay, and that's fine. He does a great job largely. Pepion's going to stay probably, and then you go, okay, there's a chunk more people who have got 2 years left to go. So you kind of into Adam Webster, right? It's got a couple of years left. You've got Pascal Gross. Has Pascal Gross not got 12 months?
He's is 2025.
Yeah. So you've got you've got this layer above that where you go, okay, we've seen how much. We've seen a lot of talk about, okay, this is the summer that we go for it, spending wise. Partly because we've made such a big profit, partly because everyone else doesn't have any money, and partly because there's going to be clubs that are going to have to sell. So within that, you go, okay, we know that we're going to have to buy probably 4 or 5 players, regular players anyway, before anybody else goes. But I think there's going to be some slightly left field departures. I think Pascal Gross is going. I'll put it out there. I've said it a few times. I think he's going to go. It feels like the moment, right? I know he said he wants to go back to Germany. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes. So it's just going to be a big summer. It's going to be a really big summer. And it sort of has to be. And there's other decisions around it. You got to look at players like Veltman. Like, I don't think we're going to clear out everybody with any experience, right? But there are certain questions around some of the older members of the squad, definitely.
Would you say this is, given the run of form we're currently in, questions surrounding the manager, some incredibly long tenured players probably about to leave? Craig, would you say this is one of, if not the most important summer in our Premier League, where we've seen many teams after a European campaign undergo rigorous changes and become a team that essentially get relegated? But do you think this is one of our most important, if not the most important summers, or do you think this is actually we'll be fine?
I think it's important. I think it's important to get it right. We've seen some transfer windows that have gone horribly wrong, right? So I think, just to piggyback off some of Robin's points, I think if Lallana goes, Gross stays, right? I don't think both of them leave at one time. So I do think at least one of them is sticking around. I do think Lallana is going to stay. I think again, reading between the lines and just from my own opinion, is that I think he's just too important to De Zerbi and getting the message across to the rest of the team. So that's like pseudo leader in what happens there, right? But yeah, we need a bunch of firepower. We need people back. We need people firing on all cylinders. We need Matoma. We need March. We need, Adingra needs a rest. Gross needs a rest. All of these guys. And we need a left back. We spoke about Barco right at the top and how excited we are about him. But again, don't want him at left back. So, and if Estepinian is not going to be ready until next season, then there's a left back. We need a right back. There's a lot of different options that we can go for here. It is important to get it right, but all at the same time, you can't bring in 7 or 8 players and expect everything to gel immediately. So it's finding that very nice balance between effective recruitment and not rocking the boat. But I'd also argue that the boat has already been rocked and we're in absolute free fall. So, there's that question to be had, but we should see a lot of that wage bill sort of recouped and able to spend. I don't think we're going to go and spend an absolute war chest. That's not the way that we work, obviously, but I do think that we're going to be spending a lot of money this summer.
Yeah, I think just really quickly, interestingly, of what we were just talking about shortly about Sol. De Zerbi has apologized several times at the start of his press conference for Brighton's performance. He says he can't accept his team playing without Sol. So make of that what you will. We get some things right sometimes, guys. Like we've got some quality content. Most of the time we don't. But since Adam's not been on lately, I feel like we've had a real rise in quality. So he'll be back soon. He'll be back, guys. Don't worry. So let's talk Manchester City really quick. I know we've not really talked much about either game, honestly, because we conceded just about every type of goal possible. We scored none. We had a XG accumulative of 1.62 over 2 games. So creating chances wasn't there at all. But I would love to hear your guys' take on the refereeing performance against Manchester City. Because I don't think there's any debate that we deserve to lose that football game. No complaints with the result being a loss column. But like it's another week of complaining about refereeing, but the free kick that was given that resulted in a second goal that essentially absolutely ended the game wasn't a free kick categorically. 2 penalty shouts, one of them felt stonewall. Like for both of you, like how did you feel about that? Like what is going on here? Like we've also had, the Forest meltdown midweek after the football game last weekend, insinuating that Stuart Atwell on VAR, who is a Luton fan, was VARing their game and refused to give multiple.
That's bonkers.
Stonewall challenges. Like
whether he's, I can't get my head around that because you're setting yourself up for it, right? Like even if you take let's say he's got 100% integrity, right, and he's made all those decisions honestly. The very fact that he's a Luton fan, like, why would you do that if you're PGMOL? Why would you put yourself in that situation where it's such an easy stick to come back and hit yourself with, right? I mean, I find that baffling. That's just that incompetence, right? It has to be to not do your due diligence to go. Like normally as a referee, like, he wouldn't have refereed that game. Like I know they tend to avoid giving, they're a bit more savvy when it comes to not giving those games as a referee, but it just seems bonkers. But as far as the Man City performance was, they just don't. That's one team, right? It just doesn't need the referee with a pale blue shirt underneath. I mean, the Foden one is just I don't think it's a dive, right? He slipped. Like I know people, I've seen a lot of people going, he just dived. I don't think he dived. He's basically either tripped over his own foot or he slipped. Either way, it's not.
It's an outright slip. Like there wasn't even a trip.
Just,
like he just skid on the surface. Like
and it's one of those ones where you go, right, I'm sure you were the same, right? As soon as that free kick's given, right, you're like, this is a goal, right? I think everybody just went like, this is ending up in the back of the net because that's just how it is. For our penalty shouts, I think one was a Stonewall penalty for me. The second one was a Stonewall penalty for me. And the first one, was that the Gross one?
Yeah.
The Gross was kind of, that's more of a, that falls in the classic kind of seen them given, seen them not given category. But he set the tone from like the very first minute of the game, pretty much, that you knew which side of the bread he was buttering proceeding. So it's just, all over the place. It's just as ever, where ultimately it's really sad that, and people go, oh, you don't have to talk about the referee every time, but actually it's sad that so often across the division, not just for us, like you say, well, Forest have had their moment. Wolves, right, have had a few. Gary O'Neill's been fined a couple of times because they went through that run of like 3 weeks in a row where they were done over by VAR.
I mean, they must have been livid this weekend, like after the Burnley game. Like Onana did the exact same challenge on the Burnley player and got given a penalty for the equaliser, and the exact same challenge, in fact, if anything, it was slightly worse against Wolves at the beginning of the season, and that was given nothing. And they, like you say, I'm pretty sure Gary O'Neill got a red card for losing his shit in that, and they got an apology for that. And that, that's an extra 3 points that they would have gotten. That puts them into
the European conversation, probably, yeah. So, I mean, I think it's sad that ultimately so much of the discussion comes back to the one person, ironically, that you don't want to hear anything about. Because if they've had a good game, you don't really mention it and you don't notice anything. And that's sad across the division, right?
Yeah. Craig, talking VAR and what they can and can't do, they're obviously losing the offside privileges next season. Hallelujah, right? Like no more arbitrary line drawing with like a protractor and a compass. Like we're actually using technology to its fullest. Talking about when VAR should and could intervene, how do you feel about? Because I feel, so I'd love to know whether you feel the same or whether you're just like, no, like that's too far. I feel like that goal, the free kick, should have been ruled out. I feel like VAR should have been allowed. I know they're not in current policy, but I feel like there should be a policy where they can turn around and go, that incident led directly to that goal. There wasn't like the ball delivered in, a bunch of messing about, goal line scramble, goal. Like that free kick took place. The next time a ball was kicked, it was a goal. And it categorically wasn't a foul. To me, VAR should be able to have the privilege to go back and go, hey, that was a clear slip, no contact at all. It wasn't a foul. Drop ball, like give it to Dunkey. It's a drop ball, play on, roll out the goal. You fucked up. It doesn't matter. We move on. Like, what do you think about that? What do you think about the privileges of VAR in general and what they should and could be able to change?
Yeah, it's a wild one, right? Like you're talking about how automated can you make this game, and how often should you be checking for fouls? Because if that free kick is given and De Bruyne blasts it way over the bar, we're not talking about it, right? Because you got away with it, or the slip led to nothing. You're then trying to police the game based off of potential actions, in which case you're then looking at every single foul across the entirety of the pitch, right? So, if that same slip happens towards the halfway line and they still score from it, should we have checked that because they scored from it? Or do you go and retroactively go and remove a goal because of the potential action that happened from a prior free kick? It just gets messy in how we're doing that. So I do think the responsibility of VAR needs to be redefined and it needs to be very clear, because at the moment it feels like they're just picking and choosing what to review and what not to review, and talking to the ref or maybe not talking to the ref, or if they feel like it's necessary, they're going to do it today, but they won't do it next week. And that's where the consistency comes from. And to Robin's point, we continue to talk about this referee stuff because we have to. I hate talking about this now. It's like stupid that we have to continue to talk about it, but it's so bad that it needs to be. So to your point, I don't think you get VAR to go and overturn that. If you do, it has to be a very defined boundary on what constitutes as a clear-cut chance or a very high XG chance if you want to go into statistics, right? Like I said, if that slip happens on the halfway line, I'm not expecting VAR to look through that, even if it led to a goal, because somehow we've caused our own mistake there if we've let it in from halfway line. So if you are going to go down that route, it needs to be a very clearly defined area where your ratio number is above 0.3 or some stupid nonsense, right? Like I don't really mind what the rule is as long as it's very clear and there's a justification behind why we do it that way. Because at the moment that isn't clear. So I think we've been hit by a deflection. I know our general consensus is this is absolutely going to be a goal because it wasn't a foul. But in a parallel universe, he's blazing that over the bar and we're not talking about it. So that's my issue with it is if you go and police that one, you have to police everything around the box, and then you're only going to criticize VAR more for not getting involved or getting involved.
I think you've just convinced me to absolutely not do it, because the key point there is you've convinced me with one key line. We need a clear policy. PGMOL cannot provide that in anything.
No,
they probably can't provide that for like lunch break policy in the office, right? Like, so that's enough for me to go, you know what? Absolutely fair enough. I changed my mind. You've won me over. I don't want PGMOL in charge of anything that requires dictating a clear policy. Like, they cannot do it. Like, it will be a roaring failure. Like,
that is fair.
It's the only thing, it comes back to that. It comes back to what we've talked about, which is like, is VAR there to get every single decision right, or is it there, as we were told, to spot clear and obvious errors in the game? Because they haven't decided that, right? Like, they may say they've decided it, but we haven't. Because in some games, as we've talked about, they try really hard to get every single decision right, and in other games they just let stuff go because it's borderline and there wasn't a clear and obvious error spotted. For that Foden one, that falls into that category of that is a clear and obvious error in terms of refereeing. But I'm with Craig to the extent we go, it's really difficult to come up with a framework within which you could reverse that decision. It absolutely is a clear and obvious error, right? In the same way that if a referee gives a foul for a dive somewhere else on the pitch, you'd go, well, that's, they've missed it. So it's, in an ideal world, you would have some kind of mechanism for identifying that, but it's really unworkable. It's one of those things you'd look at, right, when you've cracked everything else for VAR. Everything else is working perfectly, and you're like, okay, how do we make the system even better from here? They need to get the house in order about what are they looking for, and they're still not like we've talked about it again. Like that is, I still don't know what they're trying to do with it. Are they trying to get every decision right, or are they just trying to spot the howlers? Because at the moment they're sort of doing neither of them 100% of the time.
Yeah. And refereeing is always, and it always will be subjective unless you completely automate it, right? So, and that's the thing, is that we're being told VAR is there to get everything right, or at least that's our interpretation, because it hasn't been made clear that VAR is here to get everything right, or to, to look at those challenges and get to the right result. But also, referee is always subjective, right? Like, the ref is going to be in a different position every single time. They cannot be in the same place at every single indication. So refereeing will always be subjective unless you take the referee away. So and that's where we are, right? Is that we're expecting perfection whilst it can never be achieved. And VAR is trying to bridge the gap between the two, but it's impossible. And that's why we talk about it every week.
I know I keep coming back to it, but like, rugby have got it spot on with their TMO system. Like, even if you're not a massive rugby fan, I would challenge you to just go and watch one full game of televised rugby. Doesn't matter what country it's from, whether it's an international game or a domestic game. Go and watch it. And even if you're bored by the sport, focus solely on any interaction that the television official, as they call it, has on the game or with the referee. It's astounding when you compare them to football. Obviously, they've had it in play for a lot longer. Same as cricket, tennis, whatever, other sports have. But rugby have got it spot on, largely. For a game that's a sport that's a lot more complicated, right? There's a lot more scenarios that you may need someone to get involved in. But it is possible to get a much higher level of consistency. But you almost need to start again with it in football. You need to go, right, we've played around with it for a couple of years. We've seen it in operation. Actually, over the summer, you almost need them to kind of redefine what the role is, what they're expecting from it.
Yeah,
it's possible. Like, it's, to be quite frank, it's the impression I get, it's just the wrong people running it. It's not the system, right? Like, it's the technology itself can be used. I mean, it's can used, and you look in rugby, like, it doesn't delay the game any more than it does in football. And you just have the nuances of it where it's very much dependent on, I think I've been on this rant before, but it's very much dependent on how the question is phrased from the referee to the television match official. And what you have is a really equal relationship between the two of them. So there's not this kind of Mike Dean scenario where, they're not trying to dig their mates out because they don't want their mates to have made a mistake, right? It's much more of a proper collaboration where ultimately both parties are working together to try and get the decision. There's no politics involved in it. And to that, what you'll often find is that you'll find a referee will often work with the same television match official all the time. So they get to know each other in terms of, their approach to the game, which is going to make a massive difference because, you'll start to realize that, I don't know, even where the referee stands, right? Maybe the angles that he misses, but it absolutely is possible to get it working properly if you dispense with a whole bunch of politics they seem to have around it, which is the thing that does my head in the most.
Okay, so if you remove the human element of them being power hungry arseholes.
Not even that. You just remove
the PGMOL.
You remove the specific humans that we have running it at the moment.
Which is essentially all of them, though, right? Like, it is the entire PGMOL as a branch of football.
I don't even know how you do it, but that seems to be it. It seems to be like there's almost this, whether it's the hierarchy. I know we've talked about it before, but almost the way that you would have to do it is that you'd have to have, and it comes back to having the VARs are sourced from a different pool of people to the referees, and then you don't have this weird mix of you don't have this weird kind of thinking of, I'm refereeing today, but then next week it might be me under the spotlight, this kind of thing where you're trying to almost hedge your bets. Yeah. That would be how you'd establish it, where you go, okay, this is, you've got a particular set of people who are the VARs, and you've got a particular set of the people who are referees. You're not going to mix between you in terms of who's doing which job one week or the next. And that would, to an extent, remove this, this weird relationship that you've got where seemingly they want to protect each other and not, That's to say, all I can say for rugby is it seems like it's a genuinely collaborative thing where it's almost like you're basically leaning on each other to go, yeah, the television referee can obviously get all of the different angles, but then he can also ask the referee, what did you actually see? What have I maybe missed that you saw in real time? So it just feels like a lot more of a grown-up process than we have.
Yeah, agreed. All right, so Villa next up at home. I don't expect anything from that. I'm sure you two don't either. So let's just hop into around the leagues as we get to finish up this season, because there's everything's gone on in League 2 and League 1. The end of the season is here. Game 46 this week. Stockport, Wrexham and Mansfield all promoted to League 1. All of them, not long ago at all, conference teams. So you don't need Hollywood owners to get up there. I know there's a lot of hate aimed at them for cheating their way up, essentially, is the thought process for some people. It's not fair. They've got loads of money. Stockport and Mansfield were down there with them 2 seasons ago. This happens a lot. League 1 is your real litmus test. We'll see how they do because they start running into teams with essentially almost ex-Premier League wage budgets from 10, 15 years ago. And that stuff doesn't go away quickly. So big promotions for all of them. Playoff picture looks interesting as well. Lots of League 1 teams, funnily enough, all filling those roles. Crewe, Crawley, Doncaster, and Milton Keynes Dons. I'm hoping Donny win it just because of the crazy return they've had there. Just an insane run of form they've had. It's just been absolutely nuts.
Yeah, that's what I was going to mention. It is like they were on the 8th of March. They were 20th in League 2.
Out of
at that point, they were 14 points off the playoffs with 11 games to go, and they just reeled off 10 wins and 1 draw in their last 11.
They didn't scrape it either. They finished 5th out of 7. Like 7th is the last playoff spot for those listening that aren't aware of the way the League 2 runs.
You know,
'Cause I'm
like
sure that we've got people internationally that doesn't give a shit about League Two. But for those involved, yeah, they finished
that's
fifth. Like
wild,
seventh
right?
is the entry line. Like that's nuts. Absolutely.
You know, we
nuts.
talk about like you often talk about, you know, championship wise, you often talk about there's that one dark horse, right? That team that sneaks into sixth that often ends up going up. Like this is that on steroids, right? This is a team that's like they started their momentum like a good couple of months ago, and they just like they're surely favourites. They are surely favourites for the playoffs.
They've got to be up there. Yeah.
Purely based on momentum, right? Like they play Crew again now, I think, in the semi-final.
Yeah, it would
they've
make
got
sense.
to be.
Yeah.
They've got to be favourites, surely.
You would assume so. Yeah.
And what a comeback! I mean, there's a Donny fan, right? I saw it on social media today. There's a Donny fan that put a bet on in December for them to finish in the top 7. Right? He whacked 20 quid on in December, and he has just collected he's just collected a cool 10 grand.
Insane. I see these bets sometimes, and I'm like, what are you thinking? Like,
who's
too much
thinking
of the
about that?
sauce. Incredible.
That is basically it, isn't it? Like you'll have been down the pub and you're like, do you know what? I think we're gonna go up this year.
Like,
and
he doesn't remember putting that bet on.
Yeah, like no, he doesn't. Everyone else, like you can imagine he's been there. He's gone. Do you know what? I think we're gonna go up this year, and everyone's looked at him and gone, no.
Yeah, Derek, you're mental. Yeah. Oh dear. League One looks good too.
Sutton and Forest Green went down as well. The renewable, recyclable wooden stadium, Forest Green, are down. What is entertaining is that the entirety of the National League, there's a lot of teams that could come up. The entirety of the National League next season would be a lot of teams that would just be interesting to see come up to the League Two for the first time that have been around there. So for those of you that like your non-league football, I feel like the National League is going to be a really entertaining football league next year because now Chesterfield are gone. Like the last money team are out of it. Forest Green and Sutton certainly aren't that. But yeah, League One, like you say, Craig.
Yeah, sorry, I jumped the gun there. But yeah, National League looks incredible. And you've got Worthing that just won in their National League South too. So they're a game away maybe now from entering that National League table as well, which is cool locally.
Yeah, absolutely. League One final day, there was some relegation drama. A lot of teams in the mix to go down, but in the end, Carlisle went like a month ago. Port Vale, Fleetwood, and Cheltenham followed them. Cheltenham, I think, was it like 12 games without scoring a goal to start the season? Yeah. Like it was always going to be tough for them to come back. Burton, Shrewsbury both survived just by the skin of their teeth. Cambridge as well. Reading survived their -6 points deduction as well. And then going up, poor one out for poor Lincoln, who went on a heck of a run, Doncaster-esque run. Funnily enough, they're like a stone's throw away from each other as well, but they couldn't convert it to a Premier playoff space. Portsmouth, and Derby, like two gross teams. One promotion back to the Championship, and the playoff picture. There is one team that are not like the others: Bolton, Peterborough, Barnsley, and Oxford. So it'd be nice to see Oxford go up, I think. All the others are yo-yo sort of League One Championship sides these days, aren't they? Feel like we're probably all on board with seeing Oxford enter the Championship, see what they can do.
I feel like if you're going to be in League One next season, right, you're just delighted that Portsmouth and Derby are not there.
Yeah, probably.
Like it's going to be a lot more open with that. But yeah, Oxford going up would be nice. That would be nice.
Be a change of pace. Be something new and interesting.
I do have a bit of a soft spot for Bolton after that. You know, the ridiculous teams that Sam Allardyce put together when he had like Yuri Djorkaeff like trotting out for Bolton. Like, I do have a bit of a soft spot for them.
JJ Kocher is still one of my favorite.
Yeah, they're that, and they just had loads of like ridiculous. It was like almost like Harlem Globetrotters stuff, wasn't it? Like basically, so
mixed with like the most disgusting style of football ever. Like
like Kevin Davis.
None of it made sense.
No, Kevin Davis toe poking in like 15 goals a season to keep them up. And like, what was the other guy with the massive hair? Ivan Campo, didn't they?
Jeez, well, like they had just this, like,
like just had they were really enjoyable. So yeah, I have a bit of a soft spot for Bolton, and obviously they've been through they've been through the ringer financially.
Badly.
So yeah, I'd like. It's good to see them. Good to see them making a comeback.
Yeah, Birmingham and Huddersfield relegated from the Championship not so long ago.
Not
Huddersfield.
yet. They still got a game, right?
Oh, they do have a game. You're right.
Yeah, they
Rotherham definitely are.
Rotherham are gone.
That one's for sure. Yeah.
So going into the final day, then we've got
it's huge.
Blackburn, Sheffield Wednesday, Plymouth, Birmingham, and Huddersfield could go down. Huddersfield looks all but certain.
Did they play today? Did they draw today? I think they played. Did they play Birmingham today?
I think it was yesterday.
Oh, yesterday.
I think they drew.
That was their chance. They had to win that.
Huddersfield have got a 16-goal swing, so like it's not
They're
happening.
Gone.
Huddersfield are gone. I know I jumped the gun a little bit, but I still think they're gone. They're doomed. Birmingham are the ones with the chance. Poor Tom Brady went from winning.
I mean, they have to go, right? Just for if you sack your manager when you're in the playoff places and you bring in Wayne Rooney instead, I'm sorry, it's just as much as I don't like Sheffield Wednesday, Birmingham have to go just for that. It's just mental.
Craig, has there been any conversations with soccer fans that you know in the US? Has there been any mention of Birmingham City in the circles you roll in?
No. I like the two that spring to mind are Burnley with JJ Watt as well. But again, it's been not a peep. I think it's become so sort of commonplace now, right? And I think the Wrexham has taken that space and saturated it a little bit with FX and everything. So everyone's like, oh, Tom Brady and JJ Watt, cool, right? It's fine. So that, in a general term, there hasn't really been. I think people are aware of it, but no one's donning a Birmingham City shirt at the AJ's anytime soon, I don't think.
Elsewhere, going up, Hull kept themselves in it with a draw against Ipswich last night. They're the only team left with a chance of crashing the playoff party late against West Brom. They need to beat West Brom's result. So they really need West Brom to lose their last game of the season against Preston. And if they do and they win, they nick that last playoff spot. West Brom have lost their last 3 on the bounce. So it absolutely could happen. Only reason it's worth talking about as much is because Liam Rosenior is Hull manager. So fingers crossed, I think, for everybody to see West Bromwich Albion drop out of those, the inferior Albion drop out of the playoff spot for Hull to take it. And then Norwich, Southampton are both booked in for the playoffs now, fully booked in. And at the top, Leicester sealed promotion because Leeds bottled it this midweek.
They were awful as well.
There's really bottling bad. It, and there's losing 4-0 to QPR.
Yeah, who needed that win to stay up, and that guaranteed their survival, didn't it? I mean, they were dead. It feels like they were dead and buried when their manager came in fairly early on. I think they fired Gareth Ainsworth, didn't they? I think they were pretty.
They did.
Were they bottom? I think they were bottom at that point.
I'm not sure, but I know they were bad.
So he's done a heck of a job. I don't know. To your point, Josh, if you're worried about safety being the priority for next season, right? Who's the weakest? What's the weakest 3 that you want to see come up, right?
Well, I think the obvious answer, right, is Leicester are already up. They're going to be coming up, and I think we all agree that they're going to be coming up with a points deduction.
Yes.
And a transfer embargo. So it feels like they essentially have a mountain to climb before they've even finished drinking the champagne, right? It's going to be horrible for them next season. The odds of them staying up is next to nothing to me. I think they're absolutely doomed. I think they're going to go down, take the hit, and then probably focus on bouncing back up and then becoming established again 2 seasons from now. Unfortunately, that's a long game they probably are forced to play. Ipswich coming up. I don't know about you guys, but they feel like another Luton and Burnley to me. They're a smaller team in the Luton mold that you don't expect to be up. They've just rose so quick, but they play good football in the Burnley style. McKenna plays good football. It's entertaining. They've relied on a lot of last-minute results. I don't see them being a team that perform particularly well in the Premier League. And then the last team, right? Your Leeds, your Southampton, your Norwich, your West Brom, your Hull, the teams that are pretty much well known for relegation yo-yo teams. So it depends on the sort of season they have. They could end up finishing 14th and then go down 20th the following season, or they could finish 20th immediately. Like they're a weird team, but yeah, I think that's one of those ones for me. Craig, I know you have to drop here in a second.
Sorry, boys.
That was a good politician's answer. You didn't commit to any of them.
For me, if I had to have 3 come up that I think would have us best place to stay safe, Leicester are already up and their points deducted, so I think we're going to be finishing above them no matter what next season. Ipswich, I think, are not the team just yet for a Premier League place, so I'm very happy if they make it up because I think they're absolutely doomed. And then I think out of the rest of them, I think the obvious answer is Norwich, right? They're like the most famous go-go club, like between those 2 teams going. Like they're my 3. Like Norwich are a football team.
I feel like West Brom would probably be a shambles if they came up, but we'll see. Yeah, I'm probably with you on that. Hull I don't know. Hull are a bit of a funny one, aren't they? As well, they've got a relatively new owner. Who seems to be.
If Hull made it to the playoffs, they would be my new choice instead of Norwich because I think that's very Luton-esque as well. Like they're not ready for Premier League football yet. Maybe next season, like with the relegated teams coming down, being who they are.
It's so wide open, isn't it?
If they keep Rosinha and they back him, and the football continues being that way, I think they'll be in an automatic promotion.
Yeah. If you've got rid of, it'll be kind of if Southampton don't go up, you think they'll be the obvious. It's basically whoever misses out of. It's funny because like the question is I know we're over, but like if Ipswich don't go up, right? Are they doing the same thing next year? Is McKenna going? Like, is this their one? I know it's weird when you go it's back-to-back promotions, but weirdly, is this their one shot at it? In some ways,
I mean, it gives that vibe, right? Like it feels very Barnsley. You remember when they got in with Ismail, Valérien Ismail.
Yeah.
And I mean, look at him. Ever since he went to Watford, was an absolute shambles. And it's
great.
Like, I mean, that comes with the Watford territory, I suppose. But like for them, like it does feel like this is their hit. If they don't do it now, they are going to be probably in that conversation with Cardiff, Swansea, Watford, Sunderland, Millwall, QPR, Stoke, Blackburn, Sheffield Wednesday. Like that whole that sandwich of championship teams.
Because you'd expect if Southampton don't go up, you'd expect them to be favourites probably next season for it. Given who's coming down, right, or likely coming down.
Yeah.
Sheffield United will probably be in the conversation, but then it depends. Like, would they do a Sunderland because they've been so dire? Like, if they just go, the rot is set in. It's been done plenty of times. Yeah. I don't know. It'll be interesting.
I mean, look at Huddersfield right now. All right, I think that's enough. We'll be back. We'll be back next weekend. By then, the championship will have wrapped up, so we'll have a lot of those questions answered. Playoff.
I think it'll be more interesting than us talking about
getting drubbed 4-0 at home to Villa.
Yeah, picking the bones out of that.
Playoff football will be starting. It already is for the National League fans amongst us who like watching playoff football, which is always the best time of year. Playoff football, love it. So even though the Albion is bad and likely liable to get worse before it gets better, it will get better. We promise. We will get better.
Yeah,
but
it will get better.
At least we do have some fun on the side. If you have any kind of entertainment in football outside of Albion, playoff season is always the best. So we will be back next week to cover the Villa game. Regardless of the result, we will be there. They play on a Sunday, so it'll probably be same time next week. So have a good rest of your week, everybody, and we'll speak soon.